Hi, class. This is Mrs. Dupree. I apologize for how I sound. I know that some of you know from meeting with me the last couple days over Zoom, but I am currently under the weather, so I'm going to apologize if I am coughing or a little disruptive in this lecture. I'm typically pretty clear spoken, but this has been an unusual week. But I'm realizing that a lot of you are really struggling with this essay. And so I thought it would be helpful if I took an essay from a previous student who earned an A and did really well and just organized this essay really well. And I thought that it would be helpful as far as helping you see where you're going right or wrong in your own paper. So I want to start by really talking about the purpose of a compare and contrast essay. Some of you are, unfortunately, you're kind of missing the purpose and the reason why we write compare and contrast essays. Compare and contrast essays are to take one topic and compare them to another topic. That means that we're not using argumentative language. That means that we're not taking a stand. That means that we are not attempting to form an opinion or persuade our reader. And sometimes when we start talking about political issues or social issues, it can be really challenging not to get super opinionated. So I really want to emphasize that this is not a time when you're going to be taking a stand on an issue. That will come in the third paper that we write. The next thing I want you to notice is just the formatting of this essay. The student has a header right here with his name, my name, which is indicated as Mrs. Dupree. Mrs. Dupree, Instructor Dupree, Professor Dupree, any of those are acceptable. The class name, and then the date that it's due. And then you can see that he also has a top right header with his last name and the page number. The next thing I want you to note is the title of the essay. This student wrote Evolution of Women's Rights. Many of you have been writing compare and contrast, and that's not really a title of your essay, that's a title of the assignment. So I want to make sure that you know your title should indicate the content of your actual essay. So let's read aloud his introduction. For years, women have been trying to gain desirable positions in society. Women have faced many challenges regarding gender discrimination and have made extraordinary gains in areas such as the workforce, sports, and politics. Despite these gains, women are still working towards gender equality. What is gender equality? Gender equality is described as the state of having the same rights, status, and opportunities as others, regardless of one's gender. Since the 1970s, women have been fighting for their rights, but still struggle in achieving equality when compared to their male counterparts. What we can see here, the student has outlined a very clear thesis, okay? We can tell, judging by this statement, that he is going to be talking about workforce, sports, and politics. We can also see that there's a clear idea of comparison since the 1970s. We can see that he's going to be talking about the 1970s, and then he's also going to be talking about today by the end of this sentence where he says that they still struggle. The only critique I had about this introduction is I would have liked him to, at this last sentence, to have mentioned those topics that he was planning to dive into. It was a little confusing having that at the beginning with the comparison at the end. However, all in all, this is a really solid introduction with a really clear purpose. The other thing I want you to notate, the student is using third person language. We do not see any opinions with I, me, us, we, you, or your, which is second person. Everything is in third person point of view language. So then when we go to the first paragraph, we look at the topic sentence. And the topic sentence says, when comparing today to 50 years ago, the workforce is an area where women have made impressive advances. Let's talk about what this topic sentence does. It talks about the comparison. So we know the student's going to be comparing today and 50 years ago. And we know what subject they're going to be addressing, which is the workforce. Then let's look at their explanations. Back in the 60s, some of the typical jobs women held were clerks, typists, and shop assistants. These jobs were listed as unskilled or semi-skilled. Women were also generally responsible for housekeeping and watching over the children. Women had the basic jobs of cooking, doing chores in the house, and caring for the family. Women weren't granted equal pay despite doing the same standard of work as men. They earned 59 cents for every dollar that men earned. In an attempt to fix this, in 1972, the Equal Rights Amendment made it illegal to discriminate against people by gender or race. Despite its efforts, the amendment wasn't being taken seriously regarding women at work. Then in the 70s, married women started entering the workforce in large numbers. At that point, women had opportunities for skilled jobs. Since the 1980s, the wage gap between men and women has been decreasing, but the gap still remains today. What I want you to notate is that this entire section, they're not only explanations for the topic sentence, but it's all about the past. We don't see the student going back and forth. We don't see the student waver. All of this section is about the past when he's talking about 50 years ago. Then we see this very intentional shift. Today, women hold more jobs than men. For example, the healthcare sector employs more women than men. Even though more women are taking on jobs that were dominated by men in the past, they are still not entirely equal to men. Women are still fighting to change this. For example, in 2000, Betty Dukes, a female Walmart employee, realized that neither she nor most of the female employees were allowed the same promotions as their male counterparts. She filed a lawsuit with more than 1 million plaintiffs and stated that only 1/3 of the management jobs were being held by women. Unfortunately, in 2011, the Supreme Court decided there were too many plaintiffs to prove that they were all being discriminated against in the same way. But Dukes did not give up then. She led female Walmart employees in forming a smaller lawsuit and worked with lawmakers to create the Equal Employment Opportunity Restoration Act, which was passed in 2012, that would make it easier for employees to create class action lawsuits against employers regarding wage discrimination. What I want you to see is that all of the sentences in this section are about present day. We see that there's a clear comparison from what the student wrote in the first half of the paragraph to the latter part of the paragraph. And then they end the sentence with what we call a summative statement. With all those steps that have been taken over the last 50 years, women have progressed greatly in their fight for equality in the workplace. As you can see, this summative sentence is very much like this topic sentence. They echo one another in reiterating this idea that there's a comparison and that the topic is the workforce. Next, we have this paragraph that says, similarly to workforce gains, women have also made great strides in sports as well. Again, what I want you to focus on is that the student is focusing on the topic, which is sports, and that they are still making this cross comparison. There have been many times in the 1960s and 70s where women fought for equality in sports. The Boston Marathon is a perfect example of this. I'm not going to read all of this paragraph, but what I want you to note is that this is all about the past the student kept the same pattern that they kept in the first body paragraph. The first half is about the past. And then we see again this very intentional transition where they shift to today. Today, there is still sexism regarding women in sports as well. Just as it was long ago, women athletes are still often getting paid far less than male athletes. The coaches of women's programs are also affected. They are paid significantly less than coaches for men's programs. And then once again, we have this very clear summative sentence. Overall, women in sports are still being underrepresented compared to male sports, despite their many efforts to reach gender equality in that subject. And then our last body paragraph, we see the students say, along with impressive gains in the workforce and sports, women have also had a significant impact in politics. And then again, without me reading the entire paragraph to you, I want you to notice it starts before the 60s and 70s. So for the majority of this essay, we see that there's this very clear line of how the student is talking about the past in the first part of the paragraph. And then we see that they shift. Women are also aiming to make a difference by applying to higher positions. And I apologize, really it begins here. Fast forward 50 years later to 2019. And then for the rest of this paragraph, there's this very clear distinction that the student is talking about present day, and the examples are present day. And then once more, they use a sentence that summarizes the entire paragraph. And then when we take a look at the conclusion, they say, when looking at how much women have progressed since the 60s and 70s, it is clear that women have come a long way in gaining equal rights. But today, they are still fighting against gender discrimination. Women play an important role in society that some people don't realize, and they have done so even long before 50 years ago. Women have proven to be influential role models, great leaders, hard workers, and very capable of doing jobs equally to men. Since the 60s and 70s, women have gained more job opportunities in the workplace, recognition in sports, and more positions in the political system. Yet despite their efforts, they still face sexism in these areas today. Women continue to fight for equal rights and hope that generations after them will no longer see the gaps. What I want you to notice here is that even still, the student reiterates this idea of the thesis statement. That's the most important part of a conclusion. You must restate the thesis. I hope that this was helpful as you start looking through your own paper and looking at my comments and really taking a look at how you organized the essay. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm available by email, and I would love to set up a Skype or a Zoom session if that would prove to be helpful for you. Have a wonderful day and good luck on the rest of your paper.